Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So this is going to be my last video for 2021. It has been a full year of booktube and I am so happy with just the entire last year. The amazing and positive response I've gotten from all of my lovely subscribers and viewers has been incredible, and I'm just so thankful for that. I know this is a little bit early, but I wanted to make sure that my first video of 2022 was my top 10 books of 2021, so I am doing my wrap up before the end of the month. But the book that I'm currently reading right now, I don't think there's any way I will finish it before the end of 2021. And right now that is Carry On Comfort by Dan Simmons. That book is so good and yet so disturbing. I'm about halfway through it right now. I've been reading it like on and off throughout the whole year, but I'm like really trying to dive into it and hopefully finish it in January. But if it continues to be like disturbing to the point where I feel the need to put it down, it might get finished on later in 2022. So we will see. For the month of December, I was able to get through 6 books. One of them was nonfiction. I believe it was my only nonfiction book of the year. I also was able to hit my reading goal for the year. I wanted to initially, I believe, set my reading goal at 45 books, beat that about a couple months ago, so then I pushed it on to 60, beat that, and my total number of books for the end of the year is 71 and like 23,000 pages, which is mind-blowing. So very happy with that, and these were the books that got me there. So first up this month, most of these books, by the way, are going to be winter horror and like Christmas horror, holiday horror, primarily because it's Christmas time and I like horror and it's cold out, so why not? Most of January and February will also probably be more winter horror focused, and I will be having a winter horror book recommendations video coming up very soon. But first book of December 2021, this was a 5-star read. This is Joe Nesbo's acclaimed thriller, The Snowman. I did do a buddy read with my friend Blackacre Doe on this. We do have a full joint video collaboration thing going on. I'll link it above somewhere. But yes, so this was The Snowman by Joe Nesbo. This is the first time I've read a Joe Nesbo book. I know that this is book 7 in his Harry Hole series, or Hule, I don't actually know how to say it. I just know that it's not actually pronounced Harry Hole. Unfortunate name. But yes, this is book 7. I believe there's 12 books out at the moment. However, I was told you could read this as a standalone, and you absolutely can. This is the story of Detective Harry Hole and his new partner Katrine. I don't actually remember which pronunciation it is, but whatever. Right before the Christmas holiday, and they are investigating the disappearance of a woman, and all that was left outside of her house was a snowman who was creepily facing the house. Turns out that a lot of these more contemporary murders that Harry Hole is solving might be related to some other snowman related murders from the past in a different city. I absolutely adored this. I really like Harry Hole as a character. I understand why there have been 12 books about him. He's a very interesting character, and he doesn't fall into all of the brooding detective cliches that I feel like a lot of like darker crime thrillers tend to have. He is not the Elliot Stabler. If anything, he is the Olivia Benson of this. But he is a very flawed character, and he's very fun to read about, and I really liked getting to know him as well as this case. This case has a lot of red herrings that pop up throughout it, a lot of different ways that Joe Nesbo wants you to look as the reader, and yet the whole time the killer is hiding right in front of you. I don't really want to ruin anything or tell you anything, but I will tell you that you are told who the killer is very early on in the story, and you will not realize it until the very end. And I thought that was brilliant. And while it's not as great as My Beloved Chestnut Man, it is still mind-bogglingly awesome, and it really did lead me on a bunch of different false trails, and I'm really happy and satisfied with how it came out. Alright, next up is A Cold Place for Dying by Christopher Triana. This is the first time I have read Christopher Triana's work, and I also did a full review on this book as well. This book was a 4-star read for me. It is set on Christmas Eve, but is not very Christmassy at all. It is about a very sad lonely man who goes hunting on Christmas Eve because he doesn't really have anybody to have Christmas Eve with, and instead runs into two very mysterious and bizarre characters in the wood, both telling him contradicting stories about the other. You must choose who to believe, for his life depends on it. I really liked this. This is a very blunt and straightforward story. It doesn't try to be anything beyond what it is. I don't really think there's much, I don't want to say depth to this novel, because it does talk about some like interesting topics involving like mental health as well as grief, and I thought it was handled very beautifully, but it's all very surface level. There's nothing that you need to read into to understand the message of this book. While I did really love Christopher Triana's writing in this, I did not read the shorter story in the back of the book called The Love Nest, primarily just because I wanted to stick to like Christmassy and winter horror today. But Triana impressed me enough that I did order his novel, Gone to See the Riverman, after reading this, because I do like his very blunt and bold style of writing. I'm not very used to that, especially in the more kind of avant-garde horror that I like to read. And this was a very good breath of fresh air. Just being something that is, again, very straightforward in its horror without too many underlying messages beneath it. I do love the flashbacks that flesh out our main character. I think his development is spot on. That tells you everything that you need to know to understand why he is where he is when he is. And I did love that. I felt like there are some moments, like horror movie moments, where I was like, don't do that, that's a horrible idea, you should not do that, like run away, and our main character did not. That was a little frustrating, but if he had run away, we wouldn't have this great story. So definitely going to be reading more from Christopher Triana. Very happy to have picked this up. It was very cool, very wintry, not super Christmassy, even though Christmas Eve is very pivotal to the plot. This could not happen unless it was Christmas Eve for the most part. Alright, next up, and I do have a full video on this as well, that just went up. It was my last video that I posted, and this is Krampus the Yule Lord by Prynne. I talk a lot about my problems with this novel in my video. For those of you who do not know, this is the story of a man named Jesse who all of a sudden gets entangled in Krampus's plot to foil Santa Claus on Christmas in a small county in West Virginia. I'm gonna leave it at that. I do think this book is really interesting. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. It was a 4-star read for me. It impressed me much more than Prynne's other novel that I read this year, Slewfoot, which had a lot of pacing problems and a lot of character climax problems. Like, I just wasn't satisfied with how certain character stories ended after being built up so much in the story. Well, this has a little bit of that. There are definitely some serious pacing problems in this novel. There's a couple characters who, like, their story just isn't resolved in a satisfactory way, in my opinion. I did overall really like it. I really liked Krampus as a character. I really liked Jesse as a main character. And I felt very tied to Jesse's family story. That was the most interesting part of the novel to me, is him trying to reconnect with his wife and daughter and kind of get them out of jeopardy and harm's way. But as I said extensively in my Krampus video, and I won't go too much on this, Prynne chose to fully ignore the Alpine traditions and folklore that built up the Krampus that we have today, and for some reason decided that Krampus and Santa and Frau Perchta are all descendants of, like, Norse gods. Krampus is not related to Loki. Frau Perchta is just not even a part of Norse folklore. They're Alpine, Germanic, Austrian characters. Santa is not actually a Norse god. This was very bizarre, and I feel like for people who don't know a lot about the Krampus traditional folklore are going to be very confused after reading this book, thinking that Krampus is pivotal to Norse mythology. Yeah, I just really wish that Prynne had decided to focus more on Alpine traditions and all of the traditions that still exist today on celebrating the Yule Lord. There's so much out there that I really wish that there was a Krampus story that focused more on that and not on made-up mythologies. Speaking of, the only nonfiction book that I read all year was this. This is Llewellyn Sabbat Essentials, Yule, Rituals, Recipes, and Lore for the Winter Solstice. Basically, it's just called Yule. There are 8 books in the series, one for every Sabbath in the pagan Wiccan religion. I have read 5 of these prior, and I really typically love and adore these books. I think they're really insightful. They're all written by different authors. This one was written by Susan Pesnecker. I don't believe I have read anything else by her before, but this so far was sadly the weakest in the series. Typically, the books are broken down into the same chapters each time. You get the old ways, new ways, spells and divination, recipes and crafts, prayers and invocations, and then rituals of celebration. I really like reading these because I really like reading about the old ways that these pagan holidays were celebrated, the newer ways that we've modernized these holidays, and then the old school traditions, spells, recipes, like all of these awesome things that you get from it. This one I felt was the least in tune to the tradition of Yule. A lot of the like old ways and the new ways kind of didn't really focus on old traditions of how Yule came to be or where Yule came from or like what a lot of people do today. It was more like weird modernizations of what you can choose to do to celebrate Yule. What I mean by that is instead of telling us like, you know, very traditional, like, I don't know, folklore stories that may have been told during Yule, instead we were told that we could take traditional Christmas Americanized carols and take out the words like Christmas or Santa and replace them with solstice or Yule. That to me is not Yule. I do understand that a lot of Christmas is taken from Yule, but I don't necessarily need a book to tell me that a lot of Christmas is taken from Yule, so we should just take from Christmas to recreate Yule. I thought that was very weak. And this author had a weird sense of humor that I just didn't find funny, just kind of strange and almost like a dad joke constantly. So I don't know, this one just didn't do it for me. It was a 3-star read for me. Not my favorite, definitely my least favorite out of the 6 that I have read all together. I really liked the Samhain one. I really liked the Midsummer one. There's a lot of really good ones in the Llewellyn collections. This was not the best. All right. This is the last kind of Christmassy story that I read this month. This is the Vallancourt Book of Victorian Christmas Stories, Volume 5, edited by Christopher Filippo. This came in my December 2021 Nightworms package. This book's great. I really love this. Not only do I love like the cover, but this was really fun and really spooky. Most of the stories were real hits with me. There were a couple that were just very tiresome, or the language was difficult to read, or they were just very overly wordy. But I do love that almost all of the stories in here haven't really been reprinted since their original like publication years. That I thought was really cool. One of the most interesting things about this though is this kind of Victorian ghost story that we get isn't exactly like A Christmas Carol in the way that we would expect. A lot of these are just ghost stories that used to be told during Christmas, or like maybe have Christmas Eve or Christmas Day as like a sort of focal point to the setting, but there's nothing really Christmas-y as we know Christmas today that's very pivotal to these stories. These can be read at all different times of the year, I think. I think most of these were collected just because they were initially printed for people to read ghost stories during the Christmas time, as was tradition 200 years ago. But I did really love and adore these. I think my favorite story was That Awful Face. There were some really good stories in here though, and all of these were by authors I had never heard before. I really liked The Netherstone Mystery by Mrs. S.R. Townsend Meyer. That Awful Face by Florence Marriott was absolutely my favorite. It was so cute and creepy and bizarre. I thought The Undying Thing was absolutely phenomenal. The Mummy Hand, The Dead Hand, The Wicked Lady Howard. A lot of these were just really fun and unique and different. And I just thoroughly enjoyed reading these. The Wicked Lady Howard was super creepy. Oh my god, the imagery in that was just like ghostly and terrifying, and it was the most haunting thing in here. It's the only story that really took the time to explain what like this ghostly, wicked visage would look like, and it was truly some terrifying imagery. So I really, really loved that. It was a 4-star read for me just because there were a few stories in there that I was not a super fan of, and most of the like poetry in there, I think there was 4 poems, didn't really grasp me, but I'm not the biggest poetry fan. And then last but not least, this is Fall of the House of Crane by Cindy Wingett. This book was graciously sent to me by the lovely Cindy herself in exchange for a review. And it is a mashup of The Fall of the House of Usher and The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. This is a really, really unique read. I will say my only real issue with this novel is that it had a very YA tone to it. I feel like if you were giving kids who were studying Poe or Shirley Jackson something to like read to really help them understand the stories better, this would be right up that alley. It references so many Edgar Allan Poe stories, but kind of told through the lens of The Haunting of Hill House with a lot of the Hill House characters. Has some very, very creepy, well-written and disturbing images, especially towards the end. It is set in the 1920s instead of like Poe's 1830s or Jackson's 1950s, which I really like because Wingett was able to use a lens of the 1920s, what was it, like the spiritualism movement, when everybody was going to like seances and trying to contact the dead, and is even able to give the rivalry between Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Harry Houdini a bit of a nod in the book, which I also really, really appreciated. I think their feud and the fact that it stemmed through beliefs in seances is really, really interesting. If you don't know, it is speculated that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle may have hired the person who killed Houdini to kill Houdini. That is a conspiracy theory, but it is one that, you know, kind of makes a lot of sense. Anyhow, this was a 4-star read for me. It was very fun. It was very creepy. I really liked the character Eleanor. She's a very, very flawed, disturbed individual, but also very, very likable. I liked all of the Poe allusions. There's so many. I'm trying to think. The Fall of the House of Usher is obviously in there. Annabelle Lee, the oval portrait, the pit and the pendulum, the Mask of the Red Death. Just so many. And as a huge, huge Poe fan, every time that one was mentioned, I would be like, ah, yes, that story. And it was so cool to see how she was able to really blend Poe's stories to kind of be the supernatural of Hill House. I really, really liked it. There's something really interesting about the haunted house, I guess, cliche narrative. You see it again with The Haunting of Hill House, The Fall of the House of Usher, Hell House. There's just so many times that it happens, and I thought that this was very, very well done. Again, it does take more of a YA tone to it, but it is also a really good way, I think, for younger readers to engage with Edgar Allan Poe. Like, I remember the first time I read The Pit and the Pendulum, I wasn't quite sure what was happening, and I think the retelling of The Pit and the Pendulum here does a very, very good job of kind of getting the feel of what happens and still being sort of true to the story, but making it fit into Wingett's narrative. And I did really, really appreciate that. I loved the nod to the cast of Amontillado. I loved the nod to the Black Cat, which are very, very subtle in their execution, but still very core to the actual root and morals of the stories they are based off of. So I thought this was really fun. I know this is her second mashup. She did one on, I think, Dracula and maybe Frankenstein. It's called Dracula Ascending, but I forget what the mashup is. But this was the second one, and I did enjoy it. So thank you so much for sending this my way, Cindy. Anyway, that is all that I have for you guys today. I was able to get through 6 books. It was a pretty good reading month. There was only one book that I wasn't super thrilled with, and it was a nonfiction, so that's always a benefit. I do love when that happens. We got one 5-star read out of here, the rest were all 4, and then that one 3-star. Pretty pleased with that. Anyways, as always, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a happy, happy new year. and a great New Year's Eve. As always, I post every Monday, Thursday, and sometimes on Saturdays. I will not be posting on New Year's Day, as I have said before. I'm taking that as a holiday. But if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you all in the next one. Mwah.